Single, Dad found a CEO collapsing in the elevator. What she hid in her bag could silence a nation. The sound of shattering glass didn't belong in a building like Ethereum. It came from too high somewhere near the executive floors, and for a split second Graham Hollis paused mid-mop. The hum of late-night servers, flickering lights overhead, and his own breath were all swallowed by that single sharp crack like the city itself had exhaled in pain. Then silence. Until the freight elevator doors creaked open behind him. He turned slowly, expecting another forgotten delivery box or maybe a fellow janitor. What he saw instead made him blink twice. A woman, no. The woman stepped inside, staggering like a deer shot mid-leap. Her heels were gone. Her corporate jacket torn. One side of her white blouse clung to a dark stain. Her hands trembled, clutching something wrapped in a scarf. Her eyes, once infamous on business covers for their icy confidence, were now wide and wild. Savannah Renard, CEO, billionaire, wanted. Graham didn't speak. He simply held the elevator door open. She didn't thank him. She just leaned against the metal wall, breathing like someone who'd outrun a ghost. The doors groaned shut. As the elevator creaked down past level 30, Savannah's knees buckled. Graham caught her elbow before she collapsed completely. "Don't," she whispered, voice cracked. "Don't help me. You don't know who I am." "I know enough," he muttered. "You're bleeding through a $2,000 blouse and hiding in a janitor elevator. That narrows it down." She stared at him, then laughed. It came out dry, humorless, jagged. "You think this is funny?" "No," he said, guiding her gently to sit on an upturned cleaning bucket. "But if I don't laugh a little, I'll probably start yelling. And I've got a kid sleeping 2 miles from here." Something in his voice made her pause. The elevator reached the basement. No alarms, no guards, just the quiet groan of aging concrete and the buzz of an overhead fluorescent light that blinked like it was deciding whether to give up. "You should leave me," Savannah said, still holding the scarf-wrapped object close. "They'll come looking. I need it out." "And this was your best bet." Graham raised an eyebrow. "The janitor's shaft I built this place," she said, teeth gritted. "I know where it leaks." He didn't press. Instead, he gestured to the side door. "There's a staff exit by the alley. Leads to 87th. Cameras are old. Half don't work." She didn't move. "You want me to carry you? I want you to stop being decent," she said. "It's confusing." He shrugged. "I'm not decent, just tired, and I don't like seeing people crawl when they used to fly." That stopped her cold. Something shifted behind her eyes. A flicker of something buried, deep recognition, regret. "Then you were in aerospace." He blinked. "What I read your file. Before the layoffs." Her voice steadied slightly. "Graham Hollis, systems engineer. One of the whistleblowers during the Horizon project. You were blacklisted. Ended up here." A long silence. Only the flickering bulb dared interrupt it. "So you do know who I am," he said at last. "I know you believed in something. I don't remember the last time I met someone who didn't have a price." He looked at her a moment, then opened the staff door. "Come on," he said, "before you pass out and I have to explain you to my daughter." Later, at Graham's modest home near the rail line, the living room was small and warm, cluttered with second-hand books, a dusty telescope, and a watercolor painting taped to the wall. "The moon, from here," it said, signed Marley, age 6. Savannah sat on the worn couch holding a hot mug of tea she hadn't touched. From the hallway came the soft voice of a child. Daddy Graham rose. "Go back to bed, Bug." A girl peeked around the corner, hair a tangled halo, pajamas too big. She clutched a sketch pad. She looked at Savannah, eyes wide. "Is she bad?" Savannah inhaled sharply. Graham stepped beside his daughter. "No, she's just lost." The little girl nodded, then held up her sketch pad. On it, a dog soared through the stars, and next to the dog, a woman with wings. "I gave her wings," she said softly. So she can fly away, in case she's scared. Savannah blinked, speechless. Her hand trembled slightly on the teacup. "What's your name?" she asked finally. "Marley." "That's a beautiful name." Marley shrugged. "I like drawing people better than naming them." Then she turned to her father. "I'm hungry." "It's past midnight," Graham said, lifting her gently. "You'll turn into a raccoon." Savannah watched them disappear down the hall, and for the first time in hours her breath seemed to slow. She looked down at the object in her lap. The scarf had loosened during the ride. A black hard drive, slightly scratched, with one single word scrawled in fading marker, "Truth." Back in the hallway, Marley padded back toward the couch holding a drawing. "I made another one," she said, offering it shyly. It was a picture of Savannah sitting on a bench, next to a man with tired eyes and a little girl between them, all looking up at the stars. Marley hesitated. "Do you want to keep it?" Savannah didn't trust her voice, so she just nodded. The girl smiled, then paused, noticing something on the floor. "Daddy," she said, picking up a plastic card. This was in her pocket. Graham took the badge. It was Savannah Renard's Etherian Access ID. Across the back, in bold black letters, read, "Do not exit after board meeting." Graham froze. So did Savannah. A beat of silence. Then, somewhere outside, the faintest sound of gravel crunching under slow, deliberate footsteps. The footsteps didn't belong there. They were too slow, too deliberate. Not like a delivery guy or a curious neighbor. No, these were the kind of steps that knew where they were headed, and why. Graham moved, first quietly shutting off the hallway light with one hand while motioning Marley back toward her room with the other. Savannah clutched the hard drive tighter. "Stay quiet," Graham whispered. "Back door's got a bolt, but the front, I know how to disappear." She interrupted, her voice low, controlled. He turned to her eyes, searching. "Do you?" She didn't answer. Instead, she pulled off her shoes, handed him the mug of untouched tea, and stepped silently toward the kitchen. It wasn't the poise of someone hiding. It was the muscle memory of someone who'd trained for moments like this. Graham picked up the ID badge she'd dropped and slipped it into his back pocket. 3 taps on the front door. Not a knock, a pattern. Rhythmic. Delivery of voice called out. Male. Calm. Too calm. Graham didn't respond. He walked to the front window, peered through the slit in the curtain. A man in a charcoal coat. Black gloves. He wasn't holding food. Behind him, a second figure lingered by the fence, taller, leaner, watching the roof line. Graham backed away. "I've got Marley," he said, turning to Savannah. "You've got 30 seconds. Bathroom window leads to the fence. Slide the can out. Jump soft." Savannah hesitated, just long enough for him to see it, the flicker of guilt. "I didn't mean for this to follow me," she said. Graham didn't flinch. It always does. Truth's like smoke. You think it'll vanish, but it finds cracks. She locked eyes with him, then disappeared down the hallway. Moments later, a faint creak, the sound of the window sliding open, followed by the quietest thud in the backyard. Graham opened Marley's bedroom door. She was curled up under the blankets, eyes wide. "Are they here for her?" He nodded. "Probably." "Is she bad?" He sat beside her, brushing a curl from her cheek. "She's not a villain. Just someone who finally stopped lying to others and to herself." Marley whispered, "That's scary." "Yeah," Graham replied softly. "The bravest things usually are." Downstairs, the doorbell rang again. This time longer, more insistent. But the footsteps were already fading. The gravel stopped crunching. The tension began to loosen its grip. They were gone. For now. By sunrise, the sky was the color of soft steel. Graham stood barefoot in the kitchen, a mug of black coffee warming his hands. Savannah sat across from him, damp curls falling around her face, wrapped in an old flannel blanket that once belonged to his wife. "I landed wrong," she muttered. "Twisted my ankle." He pointed to her foot. "I've got ice. I'm fine. You're bleeding into my blanket." She gave him a look that was half offense, half gratitude. He poured her a cup anyway. For a while, neither spoke. Marley was still asleep. The house was quiet, except for the distant echo of a freight train and the occasional bark of a neighbor's dog. "Why'd you come here?" he finally asked. "Of all places." Savannah stared into her cup. "Because I remembered the only time someone looked me in the eye and didn't want anything in return." Graham raised a brow. "That's a low bar." "Maybe. But you didn't flinch when I told the truth." "You didn't tell the truth," he said. "You bled it." She smiled faintly. "That's fair." He set down his mug. "What's on the drive?" A pause, then data leaks. Internal memos, transaction logs, proof that Ethereum manipulated predictive data to sabotage competitors, adjust political funding flows, and reassign dissenters, reassign disappear, buy out, frame, bury. Graham exhaled slowly. "And you, I was their compass," she said, "until I realized they'd magnetize the needle. That's poetic." She shrugged. "I used to want to be a writer." A long silence stretched between them. Then quietly she added, "My mother was one." Graham nodded slowly. "My wife was a pilot." Savannah looked up. "She wanted to teach kids to fly," he said, eyes softening. "Told me the sky was just another kind of classroom." Savannah folded her arms tighter. "Is that how you ended up here?" she asked. "They grounded her," he replied. "Budget cuts. Then came the lawsuits. Then came the pills." He didn't need to say more. Savannah looked away. "I'm sorry." He shook his head. "You didn't start the storm, but now you're in it." She met his eyes. "I can't undo what I built." "No," Graham said. "But you can choose what grows in its ashes." Savannah fell quiet. Then she pulled the drive from her coat and placed it on the table between them. "I want to release it," she said, anonymously, "not to the media, not the feds." Then she hesitated. Then someone who still knows how to speak truth, without being owned by it. Graham stared at the drive, then at her. "Don't look at me like that," he said. "Like what?" "Like I'm the last clean name on your list." "You're not," she said. "You're just the first one I still trust." From the hallway, Marley's voice cut in. "Daddy." The lady, did she fly? Yet Savannah blinked. Graham smiled, pushing back from the table. "Not yet, Bug. But I think she's almost ready." The living room smelled like warm toast and forgotten lavender, an old comfort Graham had never quite scrubbed out of the curtains. Morning light filtered through the blinds in soft, slanted beams, dust motes dancing in the air like they had somewhere to be. Savannah stood at the window in his flannel shirt arms crossed, watching the fence line as if the shadows themselves might betray her. "She always this quiet in the morning?" she asked, nodding toward the hallway. Marley Graham poured coffee. "Only when she's drawing. That's when the world disappears for her." Savannah half smiled. "Must be nice." Graham said nothing. He just handed her a steaming mug and walked past, letting the silence linger like an old friend who no longer needed introductions. Marley appeared 10 minutes later in socked feet, her curls a storm of dreams. She carried a folded paper in both hands like it was made of glass. "I drew you again," she said to Savannah. "But this time, I gave you wings." Savannah blinked. "Why?" "Because yesterday, you looked like someone who forgot how to fly." Graham froze in the doorway, his back to them. Savannah knelt down. "You think wings fix that?" "No," Marley said seriously, "but they remind people that they can." Savannah swallowed the lump in her throat, took the paper, and looked at it like it might burn her fingers. A sketchy version of herself stood on a rooftop, arms wide, with a pair of uneven but determined wings on her back. The sky was messy and full of stars. "I used to think flying meant leaving everything behind," Savannah murmured. Marley tilted her head. "Maybe it just means seeing everything from higher up." Graham coughed from the kitchen, loud and intentional. "All right, philosopher, go grab your coat. Bus'll be here in 15. As Marley skipped off, Savannah turned to him. "She's not like most kids. She's not like most anyone," Graham said. lost her mom to a system that never said sorry, gained an artist with a telescope for a heart. He took a long sip of his coffee and stared at her over the rim. You know, he said, most people who hide don't spend their first night making grilled cheese and listening to cassette tapes. Savannah shrugged. Most people aren't hunted by people they once called Sir. That landed heavier than either expected. Graham leaned back against the counter. You could have kept running. I did, she said, for 3 years. Different cities, fake names, half-truths to people who deserved whole ones. But it never felt like disappearing. Just slow motion drowning. And now she looked up at him. Now I want to breathe, even if it burns. He set down his mug. Then let's start small. By noon, Savannah was sitting cross-legged on Graham's porch, sanding the frame of an old bench that had been broken since Marley learned to walk. Manual labor wasn't in the witness protection brochure, she said, wiping sweat from her brow. Graham chuckled. It's therapeutic. Besides, it's not about the bench. It's about fixing something no one else bothered to. She looked at him. You always talk like that, only when someone's listening. Savannah paused. Then softly, what if I break it worse? Then you learn. And try again. She looked down at her hands. It's been a long time since I built anything that didn't ruin someone. He met her eyes. Then maybe it's time to build something that saves one. That night, after Marley had gone to bed and the porch light buzzed softly with moths, Savannah stood alone by the radio console Graham had restored from the junkyard. She ran her fingers across the knobs. Old brass. Burnished edges. The kind of thing made to last, not to impress. Graham walked in with 2 mugs of tea. You still thinking about what to do with the drive? He asked. I'm thinking about what happens after, she said. He sat across from her, the low hum of the porch light folding into the quiet. No whistleblowing hotline, no news crew, she said. But I still want the truth out there. Graham nodded. So do it your way. Quiet, clean, real. And if it backfires, then at least it'll be your fire, not theirs. She took a sip, then glanced around the room. You ever wonder what your life would have looked like if no one ever tried to rewrite your ending? Graham didn't flinch. No, he said, because I'm too busy writing my daughter's first chapter. She smiled. That's the kind of thing that should be on billboards. He laughed. Yeah, well, I work better in small print. They sat in silence for a while. Then, out of nowhere, Savannah said, The last time I told the truth, they called it insubordination. Then they called it delusion. Then they just stopped calling. Graham leaned forward. They can't stop truth from breathing. They can only hold their breath. She looked down, then slowly slid the hard drive toward him. I want you to be the one to say it. He looked at the drive, then back at her. I clean floors, Savannah. I'm not a voice. She smiled. Exactly. That's why they won't see it coming. The scent of roasted garlic and thyme filled the air like a promise no one had the courage to speak aloud. Savannah stood in Graham's modest kitchen apron dusted with flour, her sleeves rolled up like she'd done this 1,000 times before. But her eyes kept glancing over her shoulder like guilt might burst through the door at any moment and remind her she didn't belong here. Should I chop these smaller? She asked, holding up a cutting board of carrots. Graham leaned against the doorway, watching her like a man witnessing something quietly miraculous. You're asking the guy who burns toast if the carrots are too big? He teased. She smirked but said nothing. Her hands resumed their rhythm. From the living room, Marley's voice echoed through the cracked open door. I need a quiet minute, I'm writing something important. Savannah paused. She's writing. Graham nodded. She's been working on something for the school showcase. A poem, I think. Wouldn't even let me peek. She's got that. Fire, Savannah said softly. Like she sees the world in a sharper color than the rest of us. She gets that from her mom. There it was again, the weight behind Graham's voice whenever he mentioned Ellen. Not bitterness, not sadness, just something unfinished. Savannah stirred the pot absent-mindedly. "You miss her every day," he said simply. "But Marley doesn't need a man drowning in memories. She needs one who knows how to build something from them." That landed hard. Savannah lowered the flame. "You're a better man than most people give you credit for. And you're not the villain you think you are." She blinked. "Don't look so surprised," he added, stepping into the kitchen. "You may have walked in here running, but you've stayed choosing." They sat down at the dinner table with mismatched plates and a chipped candle holder Marley insisted on lighting because real dinners need real light. For a moment, it was just the soft clink of forks and the quiet hum of the world outside not intruding. Savannah caught herself laughing at something Marley said about rocket-powered broccoli, and when she looked up, Graham was already watching her with that look people get when they're remembering something they haven't dared to hope for in a long time. She looked away. "I brought something," Marley said, suddenly standing up. From behind a stack of books on the side table, she pulled out a folded piece of paper and cleared her throat with theatrical gravity. "It's a poem," she declared. "It's called The Chair That Waits." Graham smiled. "Sounds like a mystery." Savannah leaned forward. "Or a metaphor." Marley began, voice small but steady. "In every house there is a chair that no one dares to sit. It holds the weight of whispered things of love that never quit. It waits beside the windowsill, for stories left untold, for hands that shake but still reach out, for people growing old. Some say it's just a place to rest, but I think it's much more a chair that keeps the space between the leaving and the door." By the last line, even Savannah's breath seemed to slow. Graham whispered, "Your mom would have cried." "I know," Marley said proudly and sat down like she'd just moved the earth half an inch. Savannah cleared her throat and blinked quickly. "That was remarkable." "Did you really like it?" Marley asked, leaning in. Savannah reached across the table and touched her hand lightly. "I didn't just like it, Marley. I think your poem heard me." The room went still. Then, as if the moment had gotten too big, Marley bounced up to clear the plates. "Wait," Graham said, his voice halting. They turned to him. He looked at Savannah. "There's something I should tell you both." Savannah stiffened. He walked over to the counter, pulled open the drawer, and retrieved the small black hard drive she'd given him. "I plugged it in last night. Not to snoop, just to understand what I'm carrying." Savannah didn't move. "I didn't know what I expected," he said. But it wasn't this. The level of corruption, the way data was being siphoned, how lives were being calculated into projections, like people were numbers you could erase. Her lips pressed tight. "And you," he said softly. "You tried to stop it. I saw the letter, the one they never answered." "I wrote 23, she whispered. "That was just the last one." He nodded. "I want to help Savannah. Not just because it's right, but because if my daughter's ever caught in the machinery of this world, I want to know I fought to make it safer." Savannah looked down, then stood and took the hard drive back. She didn't say thank you. She didn't have to. She looked at Marley, busy drying forks, humming to herself, and then at Graham. "You ever feel like you stepped into someone else's dream?" she asked. He smiled. "Only when it starts to feel real." That night, long after the dishes were clean and the candles had burned low, Savannah stood on the back porch alone. In her hands, Marley's poem. The stars above horizon were too few to count, but just enough to matter. She read the last stanza again, whispered it into the dark. "A chair that keeps the space between the leaving and the door." Her voice broke on the last word, and in that pause, she heard something else. A soft clicking sound from the far end of the fence line, then a flicker of light in the woods. Just one, then gone. Morning arrived in fragments, soft rays bleeding through the blinds, the scent of old coffee lingering from the night before, and the creak of old floorboards carrying the weight of something unsaid. Savannah sat at the small kitchen table staring at the black hard drive Graham had returned the night before. Her fingers hovered just above it as if touching it too long might burn her with all the memories it carried. Graham was by the sink, rinsing out a mug with slow, deliberate movements. He hadn't said much since breakfast. "I thought I'd feel better," she murmured, still staring. Handing it to someone else, letting someone else know. "And do you?" he asked, turning. She met his eyes. "I feel exposed. Like the moment you speak a secret out loud, it grows teeth." Graham nodded. Secrets always come with consequences. But silence isn't the same as safety. He pulled out a chair and sat across from her. "When I worked aerospace, he said we had a saying. If the engine fails and you say nothing, it's your fault when the plane goes down." Savannah raised an eyebrow. "Are you calling me the engine? I'm saying maybe you're the one person who knows the bolts are coming loose. And, pretending you don't, won't keep anyone flying." She leaned back, arms crossed. "You don't understand. It's not just numbers and projections in there. It's names, families, politicians. I go public with this and I won't just lose my name, I'll ruin others too. Some of them didn't even know they were complicit." Graham was quiet for a moment. "Then legacy is only useful if it doesn't make you blind." The words cut clean, not cruel. Savannah exhaled sharply like she'd been holding in a truth even from herself. "You sound like someone who's lost something," she said. "I have," he replied, "but not everything." Later that day, Savannah stood by the back porch watching Marley play with a stack of old cardboard boxes Graham had let her turn into a rocket base. The girls' laughter rang out across the grass like bells you didn't know you missed until they started ringing again. "Hey," Rocket Commander Savannah called, smiling. Marley popped her head out of the box. "Commander Marley to base. We have liftoff in T-minus 15 seconds." Savannah stepped into the yard, arms crossed. "Permission to board." Marley nodded with exaggerated seriousness. "Only if you believe in moondogs and secret wings." Savannah blinked. "Moondogs." "It's a story I'm writing," Marley said proudly. "About a dog who got left behind but builds his own rocket. He's sad, but he's brave." Savannah knelt beside the box. "And does he ever get home?" Marley shrugged. "Maybe, but sometimes being brave is just choosing to launch anyway." That stopped Savannah cold. She reached out and gently tucked a loose strand of hair behind Marley's ear. "Do you even know how much wisdom you carry? I'm 8. I carry snacks and secrets." "Same thing." Savannah laughed a real laugh this time. Then her smile faded. "Marley," she asked, voice softer, if someone knew something really big, something scary, but telling it might hurt people. "What would you want them to do?" Marley considered. "I'd want them to be brave, like the moondog, but only if they do it with love, not anger. Otherwise, it's just noise. Just noise." Savannah looked back toward the house, back toward the black hard drive on the kitchen table, back toward everything she had tried to forget and everything she couldn't ignore. That night, as Marley slept under a quilt of stars and paperbacks, Savannah stood by the kitchen window dialing an old number. It rang 3 times. "Hello," the voice was hoarse, surprised. "It's me," she said. "I don't have much time, but I need you to listen." There was a pause. "You shouldn't be calling," the voice whispered. "They're looking," I know, Savannah replied, "but I'm not hiding anymore." Another pause. "Is it true? The data you have, does it go all the way up?" "All the way," she said. "It's dirtier than I imagined. And it's been cleanly swept." A long exhale on the other end. "What are you going to do?" She glanced back at the sleeping girl in the next room. "I'm going to do something with love. Not noise." Then she hung up. The next morning, Graham found her by the front door, tying her boots with a determined grace. "You going somewhere?" he asked. "To a place that still believes in signal over static," she replied. "There's a community radio station just outside downtown. Used to be where whistleblowers read poetry when no one else would listen." Graham leaned against the doorframe, arms folded. "That's not exactly secure." "No," she said. But it's human, and they still know the sound of truth when they hear it. He handed her a folded piece of paper, just in case. She opened it. Coordinates, a time, a rooftop. He nodded. Signal booster. You'll get 10 minutes of uninterrupted feed. That's all I can promise. Savannah tucked the paper into her coat. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. Graham looked at her for a long time. "Because my daughter thinks you have wings, and I've learned not to question her instincts." As Savannah opened the front door to leave, Marley came bounding down the stairs in her pajamas holding something in her hand. "Wait." Savannah turned. Marley handed her a small crumpled drawing. The moondog. Wings wide, scars, visible eyes, determined. "I made a new version," she said. "This time he's not flying alone." Savannah knelt down, hugged her tight. "Neither am I," she whispered. Then she was gone. The door closed gently behind her, but on the edge of the porch rail something gleamed. A tiny red light, blinking, watching. It was a forgotten building, wedged between a shuttered mechanic's garage and a laundromat where the dryers never stopped humming. Warn 89.4 FM. The sign above the doorway flickered like it was tired of speaking. Savannah stood at the door in her hooded coat, clutching the black hard drive like it was a living thing. The station had once been home to late-night poets, veteran DJs, and voices that had nowhere else to go. Tonight, it was her last line. The old man at the booth looked up startled as she entered. "You're late," he said gruffly. "You still take walk-ins?" she asked, pulling down her hood. He paused. Then recognition settled in behind his cataract-clouded eyes. "Reynard," he muttered. "Didn't think you'd come back through that door." "Neither did I." He stared at her, then at the hard drive. "You've got something people need to hear." She nodded. 10 minutes. No edits. No delays. He leaned back, cracked his knuckles, and flipped a switch. The on-air sign blinked red. "This station still listens," he said. "But the world, not always." The countdown began. 3 minutes to airtime. Savannah paced the room, hands shaking slightly. She could hear the faint sounds of the city through the cracked window sirens, far off someone playing jazz on a stoop, nearby a world going on, unaware of what was about to be said. "Do you want me to do the intro?" the old DJ asked. She shook her head. "I'll speak my own name." Then silence. And then the light turned red. "My name is Savannah Reynard." Her voice, calm but not cold, broke the air like dawn. "Until last week, I was the CEO of Ethereum, a company that promised to help the world think smarter, feel safer, live freer." She paused. "We lied." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was electric. "I have with me a hard drive. It contains internal data logs, memos, and private communications. Proof that our neural behavioral tech wasn't just used to recommend music or improve shopping habits. It was used to track, manipulate, and influence decisions, political, personal, even medical, without consent." A distant noise outside the window. Tires screeching. She continued. "When I tried to raise alarms, I was removed. Quietly, efficiently, and those who knew were either paid or silenced." Another breath. "Quieter this time, but tonight I choose something different. I choose noise. I choose clarity. I choose to be one more voice that doesn't whisper when shouting might save someone." The DJ stared at her, eyes wide. Savannah's voice trembled, not from fear, but from release. "I know this may cost me everything, but if there's a girl out there like the one I met yesterday who believes people can grow wings again, then maybe it's worth it." The red light blinked faster now, and to those listening, if you feel powerless, remember this: the system depends on your silence, your stillness. But the moment you move, the moment you speak, you become the disruption they fear. Then click. The mic cut. Not by her. The DJ stared down at the console. "They jammed us," he whispered. "We're off air." Savannah froze. Outside, a black SUV pulled up its headlights, cutting through the night like a blade. The DJ stood. "There's a back exit," he muttered, handing her a small cassette. "Backup copy. Take it, and run." Savannah clutched the tape and bolted down the narrow hallway, her boots hitting the tile in rhythmic panic. She pushed open the rusted door and disappeared into the alley, the cold air slicing her lungs. Behind her, a voice echoed through the hallway. "She's gone. I repeat, she's not here." Footsteps, radios crackling, but she was already gone. 20 minutes later, Savannah arrived breathless at the rooftop coordinates Graham had given her. The old radio tower loomed against the night sky, blinking like a heartbeat. Graham stood beside a rusted control box, adjusting cables with practiced precision. She held up the cassette. They cut the station. He didn't flinch. "Then we go higher." Graham plugged the cable into the transmitter, flipped 3 switches, and nodded. "You've got one shot. 10 minutes of pure signal, just like I promised." She placed the cassette into the deck. A deep breath. Then she hit play. From windows to buses to dented kitchen radios, her voice poured out again, this time unedited, unstoppable. Graham stood back, watching the stars. "Think anyone's listening?" he asked. Savannah didn't answer. She was staring at the sky, eyes glassy. "They have to be." The rooftop wind howled louder now, as if nature itself leaned in to hear. And then, a distant noise. From the alley below, boots on metal steps. Graham turned to her, eyes sharp. "Go. I'm not leaving you," she said. He shook his head. "You don't need to." Then he walked to the edge of the building and pulled a cable from the junction box. Sparks flew. The lights went dark. Below the boots stopped. And in the blackness her voice still played, echoing across a city that had grown far too quiet for far too long. Somewhere far away, a little girl named Marley sat in her pajamas, drawing by flashlight. Her father wasn't home yet, but the radio on her nightstand crackled. Then came a voice she knew. Strong, soft, brave. She smiled. "The moon dog made it," she whispered. And for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid of the dark. The small law office smelled faintly of old paper and stronger coffee. No nameplate on the door, no sign on the street. Just the hum of an air purifier and the tension of people who knew too much. Graham glanced at the faded art on the wall, an abstract painting of a mountain made of torn newspaper headlines. Savannah sat beside him, arms across the hard drive inside her bag, pulsing like a heartbeat she couldn't shut off. Then the door opened. She entered like a song Graham hadn't heard in years, familiar, unresolved. "It's been a long time," Graham said the woman. Her voice was soft measured, like a blade being unsheathed slowly. He stood. Kara Lynn, civil rights attorney. Once an idealist. Once more than that. Now a necessary stranger. Savannah didn't stand. "You're the contact, Kara." Knotted eyes not leaving Graham. "The one who still owes me 2 coffees and a conversation." Graham cleared his throat. "This isn't about us." "No," Kara said, "but it always ends up being about what people are willing to risk. And for whom." She turned to Savannah. "You have it." Savannah slid the bag across the table. "Encrypted, with 3 fail-safes. If anyone tampers with it, it fries itself." Kara examined the drive, but didn't touch it. "Smart. But here's the thing. Intelligence doesn't win this kind of war. Narrative does, and right now yours is buried under headlines written by the people you're trying to expose." Savannah replied, calm but unwavering. "Truth doesn't need a publicist." Kara gave a dry chuckle. "No, but it needs a plan." "Otherwise it becomes background noise," Graham interjected. "Then what's the plan?" Kara sat. "We use the Freedom of Information Protocol. I know 2 senators who won't flinch, but we need you to sign an affidavit verifying the chain of custody." Savannah's eyes narrowed. "You mean make it official that I'm the whistleblower?" "Yes. And what happens after Kara didn't flinch? Best case, you're summoned before Congress. Worst case, you vanish between headlines." Silence fell heavy in the room. Then Kara turned to Graham. "But I'm not worried about her. I'm worried about you." Graham blinked. "Me?" "You have a daughter," Kara said. "They'll go after what makes you hesitate." Savannah leaned in. "Don't." But Kara continued, her voice almost kind. "You think you're protecting her by staying out of the storm, Graham, but sometimes it's the quiet ones they erase first because no one notices." He clenched his jaw. "You think I don't know that I think you're a good man?" she said. "And good men get used, or worse, convinced to stay quiet for the sake of their children. And then those children grow up thinking silence is noble." Savannah looked at Graham, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't owe me anything. If you want to walk away now, I understand." He stared at the table. The painting on the wall blurred in his vision. Then he spoke. "When Marley was 5, she asked why the moon followed us home. I told her it was because light remembers who looks up at it." He looked at both women now, voice steady. "I won't teach her to look down." Savannah exhaled slowly. Kara didn't smile, but something in her shoulders softened. "You're both going to need protection," she said. "And courage." Graham stood. "We've got one. We'll figure out the other." They left the building into dusk. The air was cooling, and the city hummed with the nervous energy of a place that always knew when something was about to change. Savannah walked slightly ahead, her steps less guarded now. "That woman," she said, without turning. "You used to love her," yes, Graham said, "before we both learned how many things love can't fix." She didn't respond, just nodded. Then, "Did it hurt?" He looked up at the sky. The moon wasn't out yet, but the stars had started blinking. "Only when I thought silence was safer than telling her the truth." She stopped walking. "So what's different now?" He looked at her, his eyes quiet but fierce. "Now I've got something worth saying." She looked at him for a long time. Not with pity, not with awe, with recognition. Then she pulled something from her coat, a folded piece of paper worn from the inside pocket. "A message," she said, "from the man who warned me before I ran." Graham opened it. It read in crooked handwriting, "They'll erase your name before they erase your voice. Speak anyway." He looked back at her. "You ready?" Savannah gave a half smile. "I was never built for quiet." As they walked into the night, their shadows fell long behind them. Somewhere far away, the first news site refreshed with a new headline. "Breaking former CEO of Ethereum and alleged whistleblower seen. Meeting with known activist attorney." Beneath it, the photo was grainy. But the outline of a man holding a child's drawing in his coat pocket was unmistakably Graham Hollis. The house creaked in a way Graham had come to know not from age but from silence folding in on itself. It was past midnight. Marley had been asleep for hours, curled up under a blanket with a book still open on her chest. Savannah had taken the guest room, though Graham could still see the faint glow of her screen under the door. She wasn't sleeping either. Graham stood in the kitchen staring at the cordless phone on the counter. Not his cell. The landline. It had rung once, stopped, then again shorter, then a third time. But when he picked up, there was nothing. No voice. Just the soft, deliberate static of someone waiting. And then, a voice filtered metallic. Low. "If you keep going, your daughter won't just lose a father. She'll lose her name, her school, her hospital file, her future. She'll become no one, and no one can save no one." Click. No call ID, no trace, just the sound of the fridge humming, the weight of the air turning solid. Graham didn't move. He didn't call out, he just sat at the table in the dark. He didn't know how long he sat there, but he knew the moment Marley padded into the kitchen half asleep, rubbing her eyes. "Daddy." Her voice was small, but the room seemed to listen to it. He looked up, managed a smile. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. She shook her head and climbed into his lap like she used to when the world was simpler and monsters stayed under the bed. Was Mommy like Savannah? She asked drowsy. Smart and kinda quiet and strong. Graham wrapped his arms around her. No, he said softly. Mommy was louder, but she believed in quiet people. Marley rested her head against his chest. There was a long pause. Then she whispered, "Are we gonna be okay?" He didn't answer right away. How could he? He looked at the window. Nothing but stars. No moon tonight. And yet, yes, he said. Finally, we're gonna be okay. She looked up, even if they don't like what you say. Especially then, he said, because silence isn't always safe, and some words are worth the risk. Marley blinked slowly, like what Graham brushed a lock of hair from her face. Like, I love you. I believe you. I'm here. She nodded. I like those ones. He kissed her forehead. Then I'll keep saying them. She yawned. Even if it's scary. He looked out at the night again. Especially if it's scary. The next morning, the house was quieter than usual. Not the peaceful kind, the loaded kind. Like everything was waiting for something to break. Savannah sat at the breakfast table scrolling through news feeds. Her coffee had gone cold. Her jaw was tight. Graham entered holding Marley's lunchbox. She's ready for school, he said. Tried to wear 2 different shoes, called it distraction fashion. Savannah cracked a small smile. She's braver than I am. He sat down across from her. They called, he said simply. Her eyes darkened. Who them? The ones who don't leave fingerprints. What did they say? Graham's voice didn't shake. They threatened Marley. Her records, her identity. Savannah's hand curled around her mug. I'm so sorry, Don'ty interrupted. Don't be sorry for what they do. There was silence, not awkward, heavy. Then he added, I didn't tell her the details, but she asked if I was scared. Savannah looked at him, and I told her the truth. That I was, but I wouldn't let fear decide for me. She held his gaze. You told her that? Yes. Savannah blinked hard. Then, quietly, I never had someone say that to me when I was her age. Graham exhaled. Then maybe this isn't just about my kid anymore. There was a pause. Then Savannah reached into her jacket and placed the hard drive on the table. I've made the final decryption keys. After this, there's no more ambiguity. Everything I know becomes public. He nodded. You sure? She didn't hesitate. I'm tired of whispering into rooms that won't echo. That afternoon, as Marley got into the school bus and waved from the window, Graham stood on the porch with Savannah beside him. She, okay? Savannah asked. She's better than okay, he said. She's watching how we choose. That's how kids learn. Savannah looked at the bus disappearing around the corner. She'll remember this, she asked. Not the details, he said, but the silence. Or the lack of it. That stays. They stood there for a while, the wind brushing past like a warning or a promise. Then Graham turned to her. Let's go finish this. Savannah didn't smile, but her eyes were clear. Yes, she said. Let's go speak where it matters. By the end of the week, Graham's house no longer felt like a home. It felt like a target. The first sign was the drone, a faint hum just before dawn. Not the kind kids flew at the park. This one was quiet gray and hovered long enough outside Marley's bedroom window to send a chill down Graham's spine. The second was the news segment. It aired at 7:03 a.m., a breaking report titled Ex-Engineer Turned Radical Inside the Domestic Disinformation Cell Hiding Savannah Reynard. The screen showed a blurry photo of Graham entering his front door. Savannah just behind him, her face partially covered by a scarf. The narration framed it as a potential organized act of tech extremism against national interests. A phrase Graham never thought would land next to his name. They're not even trying to hide it anymore, Savannah muttered, staring at the TV, her voice raw. Graham didn't answer. He just turned it off. The silence was somehow louder. Outside, someone had keyed the word traitor into the side of his truck. Marley found it first. "Daddy," she said, clutching her backpack, "does that mean you betrayed someone?" Graham bent down, slowly meeting her eyes. "It means someone's afraid of the truth," he said. "And sometimes when people are afraid, they throw words like knives." Marley nodded, not entirely understanding, but enough to keep her chin lifted. "Should I not go to school today?" she whispered. Graham looked toward the bus stop. There was no one there, just wind, dust. He swallowed hard. "I'll drive you." That night, Savannah sat alone in the small room where Marley practiced piano. Her hands hovered above the keys but didn't press them. She was staring at a small USB recorder Marley had left behind, one Graham had picked up cheap from a thrift store. Marley used it to record herself practicing the song her mother once wrote. Savannah pressed play out of instinct. At first it was soft music, hesitant notes, stumbles, giggles. But then something else. Voices, hers, and someone else's. "You're asking me to destroy this," she heard herself say. Then a lower voice. "You built it, you signed it, now walk away." The man's voice was cold, familiar, calculated. "You're asking me to disappear. I'm asking you to be loyal." Click. Savannah's hand froze. It was from weeks ago, the night before she ran. Marley must have left the recorder on the piano when she slipped out of the room, and it captured everything: the conversation with the legal counsel from Etherion's board, the one who warned her to vanish or be erased. She stood there frozen, then ran to the living room. "Graham," she said, breathless, "we have something better than the hard drive." The next morning, they uploaded the audio to an encrypted site with layers of verification. Savannah sent the link to one person, Elena Salazar, an independent journalist with a track record for surviving smear campaigns. Then they waited. 2 hours, 4, 6. At 3:22 p.m., it hit. Elena's post went live, captioned simply, "When the ones who built the system are told to disappear. Ask who's holding the broom." The audio played unfiltered, raw, human. Within 20 minutes, it had over 400,000 views. Within an hour, Etherion's stock dropped 8%, but that wasn't what made Graham's breath catch. What made his chest tighten was Marley coming home, dropping her backpack and saying, "Daddy." "I heard my recording on the bus." Graham crouched down. "Did it scare you?" "No," she said. "They said it was the bravest thing a kid ever did by accident." He smiled through the sting in his eyes. Sometimes the truth needs a little accident. But by nightfall, the threats escalated. Their internet was cut. The house phone rang every 15 minutes. Cars parked across the street, never getting out. Savannah paced by the window, whispering, "We're not safe here anymore." Graham looked at Marley asleep on the couch, her head resting against a stuffed animal with one ear missing. "I won't move her again," he said quietly. "Not unless we have to." Savannah turned. "You've done enough. This shouldn't be your fight anymore." He met her eyes. It became mine the moment Marley's voice saved more than just a song. She blinked. "What do we do now?" He looked at the USB recorder on the table. "We wait for the noise to grow. Then we speak under it." She tilted her head. Below the noise, he nodded. "Where truth still echoes." Outside, the sky was purple with dusk. Inside, the house flickered with quiet resistance, small lights, quiet breaths, and a faith not in winning, but in standing. Not because they were heroes, but because someone had to stay standing, long enough for the lies to fall over on their own. The storm didn't come with thunder. It came with silence. Etherion released an official statement, a fabricated audio file designed to manipulate public sentiment. "We are investigating its origin." They didn't deny the voice, they discredited the source. Graham stared at the TV in his kitchen hands wrapped around a chipped coffee mug. The sun hadn't fully risen, but the damage already had. Savannah entered a folded newspaper in hand. "They're offering me a deal," she said. He looked up. "Publicly recant. Blame it on a mental breakdown. Say I fabricated the audio to sabotage the board after being removed. And in return, no jail time. A clean break. A quiet exile somewhere offshore. Graham took a long sip of the coffee. And what happens to the truth? Savannah smiled bitterly. It gets buried. Again. Just in a nicer grave. She sat down across from him. Her eyes weren't tired, they were resolved. A kind of stillness only found when a person has walked through fire and accepted they might not come back. Maybe it's time, she whispered, for me to disappear for real. Graham looked at her then at Marley's drawing still taped to the refrigerator. Funny, he said. My daughter drew you with wings. Not because she thought you could fly, but because she believed you were trying. Later that day, Graham packed up a box in the garage. Old engineering books, the broken telescope, a photo of Ellen, his wife, smiling on the hood of their rusted Subaru, the edges faded by time and sunlight. He sat on the concrete floor and held the photo for a long while. Savannah stood in the doorway watching. She was beautiful, she said softly. Yeah, he replied. And stubborn as hell. Savannah smiled. She once told me Graham added, your legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what you protect while you're still breathing. Savannah knelt down beside him. And what are you still protecting, Graham? He looked at her. Really looked. You. 2 days later, Savannah vanished from public view. No press release, no airport footage, no goodbye. One moment she was the woman at the center of the storm, and the next, nothing. People assumed she'd taken the deal. Graham let them think it. But in a small town, 3 states over, nestled near a forgotten lake, Savannah, Renard began her new life as Sarah Moore, a math tutor at a community center, a woman who didn't own a cell phone and baked muffins on Saturdays for children she didn't know. Graham and Marley visited once a month. They never stayed overnight, never used the same route twice. But every time they arrived, Marley ran to her like a niece to her favorite aunt. And every time they left, Savannah stood at the porch, a quiet figure behind a screen door, waving as if she didn't belong to any past anymore. Graham, meanwhile, took a consulting job at a small ethics in tech nonprofit. Nothing flashy, just honest work. He wore denim to meetings, drank burnt coffee, spoke at 2 local high schools about digital responsibility. Once a student asked him, "Do you ever miss the spotlight?" He paused. "No," he said. "The spotlight's loud. Truth prefers the corners." One evening, Graham and Marley sat at the kitchen table cutting vegetables for soup. She was humming softly the same melody Savannah once played on their dusty piano. "Dad," she said, not looking up. "Do you think they'll ever say she was right?" Graham didn't answer immediately. He set down the knife, wiped his hands on a dish towel. "Maybe not," he said. "But here's the thing. Truth doesn't ask to be recognized. It just asks not to be forgotten." Marley looked at him. "Is that why we still visit her?" He nodded. She protected something while she was still breathing. Marley smiled faintly. "So did you." That night, Graham pulled a small frame from a drawer. Inside it, a single sheet of handwritten music, the melody Savannah taught Marley, the one Ellen composed before she died. At the bottom, written in Savannah's careful script, "Don't let your voice disappear beneath the noise. Sing even when no one listens." He hung it above the piano. No ceremony, just a quiet promise between the past and what came after. The snow had come early that year. It fell in quiet spirals outside the windows, dusting the porch railings and the pines beyond. Inside the little house, the fireplace crackled gently, sending shadows dancing across the floorboards. Marley sat cross-legged on the living room rug, her notebook open, pencil moving in short, deliberate strokes. Her drawing was nearly finished, a piano with wings. Graham watched her from the couch, a cup of tea in his hand, steam curling past his face. He felt older lately, not tired, just settled like a stone that had finally found its place in the riverbed. "Hey, Dad," Marley asked, still sketching. "Yeah, sweetheart." She looked up thoughtful. The things Miss Savannah told you back then. Do you think all of it was true?" Graham took a long breath. He set the cup down and leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I don't know," he said. "I think some of it was. Maybe not all the facts, but the why behind it." That felt true. Marley tilted her head. "So, does that mean what you did was right?" He smiled gently, not confidently. "I think so. Not because it was easy, or even smart, but because it's what I'd want you to do if you ever had to choose between comfort and conscience." She was quiet a moment, then nodded like she understood something too big for words. He looked at her drawing again. "Wings on a piano," he asked with a small laugh. She grinned. "It's flying out of a building, like in those old spy movies. But instead of exploding, it just plays a song that makes people stop lying." Graham laughed, the kind of laugh that feels like home. "I hope you never lose that imagination," he said. Marley looked down, hesitated, then flipped to a blank page. Her pencil hovered. "Can I ask one more thing?" "Anything." She glanced up. "Do you think Miss Savannah ever missed the world she left behind?" Graham thought for a while. "I think," he said slowly, "she missed the idea of it, the version she once believed in. But I also think she found something better. Like what he stood, walked to the mantel, and took down a frame. Inside was a single sheet of music, Ellen's melody, handwritten by Savannah. He handed it to Marley. "You," he said. "She found you. And maybe in some way we both gave her a place where her voice didn't have to fight so hard to be heard." Marley held the frame close like it was more than paper and ink. She wrote something on the bottom. She said, reading it again aloud. "Don't let your voice disappear beneath the noise. Sing, even when no one listens." She looked up. "Is that what we're doing now?" "Still singing." Graham didn't answer with words. He walked over to the old upright piano, lifted the lid, and played the first few notes of that now familiar melody. Marley joined him, her smaller hands echoing the same notes. The tune drifted through the house, not perfect, but full. It didn't ask for applause. It didn't need an audience. It was enough to be heard in the space between father and daughter. Weeks later, a letter arrived. No return address. Just a single page folded twice. Inside it read, "The air is colder here, but the silence is kind. I planted tomatoes last week. They're stubborn, but so am I. Thank you for giving me back the kind of life no algorithm could predict." S. Marley read it aloud, then tucked it into the same notebook as her drawing. "She's still writing," she said, smiling. Always, Graham nodded. "Some people leave footprints. She leaves ink." That spring, Graham was invited to speak at a university ethics panel. He wore a borrowed blazer and brought no slides. He told the students a story not about betrayal or corporations, but about choice. He said, "The world will always ask you to lower your voice, to blend in, to settle, but the ones who leave something behind, they're usually the ones who stood still long enough to hear what mattered most." One student raised her hand. "Do you think one person really makes a difference?" Graham looked toward the auditorium's back row where Marley sat swinging her legs. "Yes," he said, "because the difference isn't always measured by what changes in the world, but by what doesn't change in you." Back home, Graham and Marley hung the speech transcript beside the piano beneath the music sheet. Two voices, one melody, and beneath it all, a silence no longer burdened by fear, but filled with presence. On a quiet summer evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and the fireflies blinked like slow applause, Marley asked her father one last question. "Dad, are we the good guys?" Graham looked at her. At the child who once gave wings to broken songs, at the girl who kept believing even when adults stopped, and with a voice low, steady, and full of something deeper than certainty, he said, "We tried to be. And maybe that's the loudest truth we'll ever tell." And that was Below the Noise. A story not just about secrets or systems, but about the quiet courage it takes to do the right thing, especially when no one is watching. about a single dad, a forgotten melody, and a woman who chose truth over comfort. But now, I'd love to hear from you. Where in the world are you watching from? Whether you're in a small town or a big city, your voice matters here. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What part of the story moved you the most? And if this story stirred something in you, if it reminded you of someone you love or made you pause and reflect, please consider subscribing to the channel. We share stories like this every day, crafted to uplift, inspire, and connect. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. Until next time, stay kind, stay curious, and never stop listening below the noise.